Hello, FewCandy here, and welcome to Holmstock, the Detailer's Collective collaborative city build. We're looking at Picanna's incredible highway project and service area that he did in the first episode of this series, like insane details right from the offset. We've also had Scunny come in and start us off with the town of Billy, which we are going to be expanding upon today. We've also got Timeister, Canadian Moose, Infrastructurist, and myself as part of the collective. We've also got guests coming in for this series, so make sure you subscribe to all of the channels which are linked in the description below to make sure you don't miss an episode. I'll also be sharing them on my community tab so you can keep in touch with it that way as well. Now, for anyone who has seen Sunny's episode, you may remember that down by this waterfront over here, he left these little gravel roads, suggesting that perhaps they would go towards a rundown industrial waterfront in the future. So me coming in next, I want to take up that idea and I want to expand upon it. And we're going to be doing just that. We're going to be building a rundown industrial waterfront over here. So my kind of vision for this is something a little bit similar to sort of the East End Docklands that you see in London, where there's some larger machinery that sort of seems a little bit out of place if we take a look at Google Earth very quickly. There's lots of keyed waterfronts that aren't really being used specifically as harbours or that kind of thing. So I want to kind of take that idea and intertwine some functional and in-use smaller industrial units. One area in particular with some more industrial production facilities, which we'll come back to a little bit later on, and definitely a few abandoned warehouses along the way. So starting this off, the trickiest thing with this area is the terrain, which you can see here if we turn on the contour lines. It's pretty intense. So we're going to start off with a little bit of terraforming just to give ourselves a nice sensible waterfront level here. Then we're going to work on how we're going to actually make this meet up with the industrial area that Sunny put in at the top, which is going to be tricky because it is quite a slope down. So we'll work on that a little bit later on. So let's give ourselves a small brush size and we're just going to flatten out a small area of the waterfront here. I'm going to start just like that and we're going to layer it up as we build along it. But I do want to make sure that we've got sensible roads coming down here to start off with, and also allowing ourselves a little bit more room to get these roads down sensibly. I think, and I'm sorry Sunny, I hope you don't mind this, I'm actually going to delete out these little industrial buildings here, which are actually zoned in. So let's go ahead and just remove the zoning from those. And then we can remove these buildings here, and that'll just give us a little bit more breathing room for our transition down this pretty hefty slope. And I'm going to redo this road, so we'll trim that off there in a second. And then actually with these ones, I was thinking it would be more interesting to actually have this diagonal road come down and possibly more sensible as well. Because if we take a look, this is kind of the one that is closer to the town centre over here. It can flow down nicely through here, past the edge of the industrial district and come down, rather than kind of going through the middle of it and through the middle of this housing estate over this side. Obviously it's going through the housing here as well. But this one also has a slight kind of kink in it. So this one's a little bit more free flowing. So I feel like that would make more sense to bring that down here. And it will also give us a few more interesting angles to work with within our build as well. So let's go ahead and just grab this road, which I'm pretty sure is the basic one. Yes, it is. We're going to make sure we've got constant slope mode on for this so that we can bring it down nice and sensibly to the waterfront. And I'm going to go to about there. So that's a slope of 9.8, which isn't too bad. And obviously it looks ridiculous right now, but we can work the terrain around this as and when we come to it. I'm thinking maybe a slight bridge section here so we can get some roads going underneath if we flatten off more of the terrain back a little bit. Again, we can kind of redesign that as long as we've got the key road in for the moment. That's all I'm really worried about now. And then I think with this section, we'll probably transition into an alleyway road. So we'll snap that into the centre there. Again, making sure we've got constant slope on. And that's 10.3, so that's pretty steep. 10.1 right down to there. I think we can cope with that, so let's bring that in. And that's kind of nicely sunken in amongst the terrain, which I quite appreciate actually. And then we're going to bring this out along the waterfront. Now I'm thinking possibly it could head off this way, so let's just add that in. And then we'll just follow this waterfront round pretty nicely. So I'm thinking actually we'll kind of go as straight as we can along here because we can create a nice sort of industrial waterfront to it. I want to say a marina wall, a harbour wall, but it's not really going to be a harbour. It is quite high up, but I think that'll be okay. If we're talking about industrial usage, then perhaps being tall for the size of the ships actually isn't too much of a bad thing. We can connect that one in there, and then let's bring this around. We're going to actually curve this a little bit rather than going straight, and then bring it out into another large straight section, which can be used front and center for industry to face against. So I'm actually going to turn off all snapping here, because I want to get this in as close to those contour lines as possible, but also going straight. So something like that, and then we can just tidy up this section of road here. So before we start getting into placing buildings, I actually want to work on the waterfront a little bit to get this how we want it to look, with kind of areas of quay wall and areas of maybe some rock and more overgrowth that's a bit more natural. So I'm thinking this straight bit quay wall, this straight bit here, and then a bit more natural to either side of it. Now, I don't really want to just upgrade the road to a quay wall. I don't feel it looks super industrial when you've got that fence along it. It kind of stops it from being realistically somewhere where ships could pull up and load cargo, for example. Not saying that this would be a massive port area, but it definitely could take smaller ships out through the peninsula here and around the map. And let's just take a moment actually to talk about this map as well, because it's absolutely stunning. It is called Holmstock, and Poplar Ponderosa has built this map specifically for this series, and it's awesome. We've got a mixture of islands, smaller inland areas, lots of water to play with, lots of stunning, beautiful highways. Like, let's just come on over here and take a look at this magnificent double stack bridge. Yes, yes, yes. Superb work by Poplar. So you can play on this map and download it from PDX Mods. There is a link in the description below for you to do that, so you can play along with us throughout this series if you want, or go in your own direction and create your own magnificent city on this beautiful landscape. And the other thing I really like about it is it's not too hilly, so it's kind of deceivingly flat, but there's lots of undulation within it, so you actually get this really kind of interesting natural landscape as opposed to just being super flat and stagnant. So I love a hill. I think Poplar's done an amazing job, and I say that as I've completely flattened out and ruined the landscape around here, but it was just unbuildable for an industrial waterfront, so here we go. So my idea for the quay wall is instead to use pillars. This is something I've done in my Philadelphia series as well. I think it works really, really, really well as an alternative to just doing the quay wall. It's obviously a little bit more finicky to get in, but you got to work hard to achieve a realistic vision, I suppose. So that's what we're going to do here. Now I'm going to go to fence mode with this. We're going to use line tool and we're going to place these in. So this is going to form a very nice level concreted surface which will go up against our road here. And the reason why we're doing it up against a road is because you'll see in a second they push the terrain down when you place them in, so it can end up looking fairly ugly if you don't have that road there to kind of support it. So you can see here the road actually stops the landscape from sinking in, but you can see all around the pillar it is sunk in, unfortunately. So now with Move It, we're going to come in here, we're going to filter to props, we're going to go to the marquee tool, and we're going to select all of these and make sure that they are the same height as each other by pressing Ctrl H. And now really importantly here, we also want to make sure that they're really nice and level with that road, so we're not getting any weird dips. We'll worry about covering up these oddities at the side a little bit later on. But yeah, that gives us a nice little quay wall there. Now the difficulty here is obviously the water surface is below that. If you have it low enough, you can actually get away with just leaving it like that. But clearly our road is a little bit higher here, so we're going to cover it up by adding in a few more pillars. So we're going to do the same thing again. I'm going to do it slightly further away for reasons that will become relatively apparent in just a second. But if we add this in, trying to get roughly the same length and the same number of pillars in here, which will make our lives easier in the long run. So something like that. We're then going to come back into Move It, and the reason why I've done this is so that it's much more easy for us to select just these pillars and not the pillars that we've already done here. We're going to Control H, so they're the same height as these. And now we're going to do something a little bit finicky with them. We're going to come out of Move It, and we're going to go into extra detailing tools here. So by clicking on a prop, we can bring up this menu if we've got the mod installed. Then we're just simply going to flip every single one of these So it creates a nice vertical wall, which we can then move in front of these ones to create our harbour wall. Just like that, and it may seem finicky, but it's actually not that bad once you get into a routine of it. It's pretty easy, and using the snap on the angle as well helps too. So we're going to do exactly the same thing over on this straight section here, and then we'll work on a natural boundary in between them. Okay, so I said natural, it turns out it's relatively man-made looking, but there we go. We've got a few little dead bushes mixed with some boulders with some gravel surface underneath just to kind of cover up some of those green patches here, and one lone little tree, which I thought was quite nice. So I'm going to start working on this section by section because I want each kind of industrial unit to have its own type of vibe, whether it's abandoned and boarded up or whether it's actually in use but a bit more run down. So I'm going to start on this section here, which I do actually want a kind of marina yard, which I think would suit this type of waterfront pretty well. But I want it to kind of feel a little bit segregated, so I'm actually going to change up some of this road structure here. So I'm actually going to create a connection going straight across from this road up onto this one here, and then I think we'll possibly do something similar this side maybe, but we'll come to that when we do that. Now I do want to get rid of all of the crossing markings here because I feel like that's a bit too much for our rundown industrial area, so we're going to hide those away there, and we may do a little bit of move it to kind of control that node and open it up a little bit depending on what we do with the roads here. I definitely don't think we keep this, that it should be this size of road. So let's go ahead and upgrade that to an alleyway like that, which I think is going to be a bit more appropriate for our industrial area. And it also means we can cover it up with surfaces. So yeah, for this section, I kind of want it to feel a little bit like an abandoned boatyard or something kind of similar to that. So what I'm thinking firstly is down here, we definitely want a ramp going into the water. So I'm actually going to pick this piece here. I'm going to change the rotation down to about 30%, I think. No, that's way too high. We'll go to 15 and see what that looks like. Yeah, that feels like a sensible slope down into the water. So now we can grab this with move it and we can just lower it down. And also move it back into position so that it's up against the road here. And what I want to do is also do the same thing with this one next to it as well. So we'll go down 15 again. And then let's go into move it, make sure it is the same height as this one, and we can just shift this back into place as well. And then I kind of want to follow on this pattern, so like that looks pretty good to me, and I think we can leave it like that because it's going far enough into the water that you can imagine a boat was kind of coming down that way. Now we do have little gaps here, so we could fill these up with some more pillar blocks going in this way vertically. which I think we will do, but I will come back to that in the time lapse because we spent a long time on this waterfront so far and we haven't put a single building in yet. But if you are enjoying the video, please do remember to hit the like button and hit subscribe for more. My builds are generally a pretty similar style to this, quite a lot of detail, and not a lot happens until the magic at the end when we add in the finishing touches. So what I want in here is I want something that looks like a bit of a boathouse, like a warehouse style building, and then also a small office, I think, too. So if we come into our buildings, let's take a little look at industrial. And what I'm looking for is, yeah, something that looks sort of like this. And I actually want it set further back in the actual lot. So instead of going for something that's a bit closer to the road like this, because we'd have to add in road connection in order to put in a functional industrial building. Of course, we could just use the vanilla ploppables if we wanted to. And therefore we don't need to have a road, but I think we're going to go for this actually. The 2x6, we get this small little warehouse in it, and we don't need to worry about the surfaces for now because we can change that all up. So let's just line that up to the road there. I want to keep a bit of a gap behind it because there's a slight raise in the terrain there, and I want to kind of put in a little fenced off, overgrown area. I want a lot of that kind of in between the different industrial units that we're going to have down here, so I think that that'll be nice there. Now if we come into office, I want to find something that's low density, absolutely tiny. It could even be as simple as that. It's quite a low-key looking building. Quite like that one. That one's a little bit too fancy, I think. So yeah, we'll go for this model. Now let's place that in down here so it's more towards the actual entrance to the boatyard. So something like that will probably do nicely. And then we can use a bit of surface in here, a whole bunch of props to kind of mess it up a little bit and make it feel a little bit more realistically like a boatyard. But I'm going to come back to that in just a second because I want to get a few more buildings in before we start any manic detailing. So we're going to come back into terraforming now, and we're just going to eat away a little bit more at some of the land here so we've got a little bit more space to play with. Because I want kind of two elements still down on this bottom level. And the first one is going to be some smaller units here that can be functional. So we're going to go in and use actual industrial buildings for this rather than props. And again, I probably want something that's kind of warehousey like. Just nice, simple, small units. So something like that works pretty well. We can alternate it up with some different looking buildings. So very boxy, very plain, gives us the opportunity to add some nice stains and that sort of thing to it. If we go for one that's narrow but a little bit further back, then again we're not going to be constrained by the road being there. We can of course always remove the props that are on the front of it if that's causing us any issues. I want to leave a little bit of space in between buildings here as well for some more prop work, because the main thing I noticed really when looking around Google Earth was the amount of kind of trash and old cars and vans and crates and containers and that sort of thing that are just lying around a lot of these areas. So that's what I definitely want to come in and incorporate within this one. Then perhaps we have a larger unit on the end there. We can kind of create some yards around those with some extra props and interesting things in just a second. And perhaps we even add one more in, or something like that perhaps. That's not too bad. And then over here, I want an abandoned lot, like I mentioned up front. So I want this to be non-functional, so I'm going to use the vanilla proppable assets for this, and we're going to choose a building that we can essentially board up and add a ton of graffiti and damaged decals to the edge of it and that sort of thing to make it feel like realistically abandoned. So I'm thinking maybe this one, because it's got some nice windows we can add some boarding up to. And it's pretty plain and simple. It's made of brick, so it'd be nice and easy to add our kind of rundown damaged decals too. So I think let's add that into here. And then we definitely want to add fencing around this, like security fencing to it, to kind of make sure that people aren't going into the abandoned lot. Maybe it's for sale and just hasn't been sold yet. So I'm going to use some prop fencing for this, because what we can do is actually then break it down a little bit and make it look like someone has broken in at some stage. Which isn't too bad. We've got a bit of sorting out to do on the corners, but that's not a problem. And I think to kind of symbolise a gate, we're going to use a different style of fence in one of these. So something perhaps like this one, which could symbolise a gate potentially in the middle here. Again, we need to use Move It to make these line up. It looks a little bit like higgledy-piggledy, so I'm kind of okay with that. But then yeah, within the fencing, I think if we come back to this back section, let's actually delete out this prop here, because we can use the shorter version of this industrial fence. So we'll place one in here and one in here. And already actually, that is leaning slightly, which has worked beautifully in making this appear like it is a bit of a rundown fence. Now these are slightly different colours, which are annoying to say the least, but I think we can work with it, because then if we come in and select one of these pieces, what we can do is kind of tip it back almost like it's fallen down, and perhaps this one just a little bit less so, something like that. And then we can put some props and overgrowth around this to kind of cover up how dodgy it looks at the moment. But that'll definitely look like someone's kind of broken in here. And perhaps actually if we even grab this one and we'll change the rotation right down to something pretty small like 1 and just angle it a little bit more like that, just so it's leaning that tiny bit. Now I know that looks ridiculous at the moment, but we can add a prop underneath it to show like the fence has fallen onto the prop or something like that, and again cover it up with a bit of overgrowth this side. So we can use a few different select bushes. Let's even change the height of it a little bit to vary it up. And they are actually stacking on top of each other, which is kind of nice in this case because it gives us a bit of height variation and still makes it look pretty overgrown. And that kind of starts to cover it up a little bit. The colour of the fence is frustrating, like we can't seem to change this single piece, but we could change this one, but I don't really want it in the white, I want it in grey, so I'll work on that a little bit later on. But that's just a little idea for a broken down section there. And of course we'll come in and tidy these bits up. And then we want to board it up. So what I'm going to do for this is actually go and grab some crates. And we're looking at the top of the crates really here, because that's what we're going to use to board up these windows. And I think that one is probably the nicest one that we can use here. That one's pretty good as well for singular windows. But let's use this one and let's make sure that we're not snapping vertically, so we can snap to the side of the building like this. And then we can just grab the crates with Move It and sink it into the building and then adjust the height so that they're covering this window like that. And we could even use extra detailing tools to kind of slant some of them so it doesn't look all so super samey and uniform. And then of course we've got a whole bunch of decals that we can use to add some wear and tear to the building. So things like these cracks and scuff marks and stains and things like that we can use to make it look old and run down. We also have some rust in here as well, but obviously it's made of brick, so it doesn't really make sense to have rust on the walls here, but we could definitely put it on the metal roof perhaps and really start to like mess this up. So that's the type of thing that I'll come in and do for the detailing, but definitely crates over all of the windows. And we can also then use some odd bits of graffiti to kind of go over those crates as well and up the wall, so something along these lines perhaps. And we're going to start to get a really nice abandoned warehouse. Now this one is actually abandoned already, so that's absolutely marvellous. We have got demand for industrial, and if we take a little look at the city, unemployment's only at 7.7%, so it's not too high. So I think we're okay to keep adding industry, and I'm not quite sure why that one's abandoned, but we'll give it time to see what it does. So the next thing I want to do as well is add in some more warehouses up here, but obviously we need to start transitioning up to this level, which the town of Billy is really set on. So I want to grab a kind of a level that's sensible from here, so probably something like that, and start to layer out a bit of a plateau. So we could go something like this. Let's see how it merges onto this road. It merges pretty well actually onto this road this side, and we can keep that retaining wall in, which I think will make a lot of sense there. So yeah, let's just flatten this all out and get ourselves an area to play with. So something like that will do pretty nicely. And what I want to do up here is create some really big warehouses, but it's difficult to make these actually functional. So we're going to make one of them functional by going to find it into our industrial buildings, and then we're going to look for some larger warehouses. And these will be warehouses because we probably don't want the chimney props and that sort of thing popping up on it, because we want it to look like one massive, huge, big, long warehouse. Again, taking that inspiration from some of the big buildings that we saw around the riverside in London. So I think this is probably kind of the perfect thing that we want to use here. So I want to kind of pay attention to the edge of the terrain, because we're going to make it slightly angular to make it look a little bit different and more interesting to the other buildings we've got. So I'm going to place one in there, and we're going to have another one down the side of it, but we'll pay attention to where that door is. That door could kind of be functional. This is the sort of thing that I'm doing when I'm creating these larger buildings out of smaller assets, is actually making sure if it makes sense to the decorations which are on the building. So there you can see we're not covering up any doors in this case. So we've got those in, and we can connect those up to the road, and then we're going to come into vanilla ploppables, and we're going to find this warehouse asset within here, which I'm pretty sure is that one. I mean, this would have worked for the purpose that we want, so that's absolutely fine. It's also coming in the same theme that we already have as well, same colour theme, which is very helpful indeed. And what we're going to do is we're just going to layer these on in behind. So we're just going to fuse them into the back of the building, essentially, like this, and we'll keep going. I think we're actually going to utilise it this side too, so we're not going to create a road round here, but we're going to make it seem like there is an extra little yard at the back there. So we'll add one more on here, and that one I've just realised is totally not straight, so we'll fix that. I'll have that, and then we've got a sort of office door there. And we do just need to push this landscape back just a tiny bit more so that we can get this road kind of coming round, or a symbolised road coming down the side here into a yard at the back by the warehouse doors at the back over here. So we can smooth this off here so we're not getting in that kind of sharp cliff texture. I mean, you could even put in a key wall edge in here, I suppose, to at the edge of some industry buildings at the top here, but we want to kind of keep that relatively narrow, I think, so something along those lines. And then we can put some more industry back in up here where Sunny had it. It would just be smaller, narrower buildings than what we had before. Now, of course, we want to add a road entry into this, so let's grab our alleyway roads. Now we can see from the terrain we're coming in at this height here. Now I'm actually going to cover up all of these roads with some surfaces, I think, so what we do here isn't really going to matter too much, but we want to sort of make it seem sensible with the skid mark lines that we have on these roads, so we'll just do it something like this for now, so at least those buildings are connected in, and we'll come back through and tidy this all up in just a minute. In fact, I think we'll actually go ahead and do it now, so let's detail up this side of it with the things that I've mentioned, and then we'll come on to what we're doing over this side. Okay, so I may have gone down a rabbit hole I wasn't quite prepared for, but I love it. I love industry. For anyone who doesn't know my channel, absolutely my favourite thing to do, particularly when it looks like this. Really pleased with how this has come out, particularly like the kind of ivy going up the walls works pretty well, I think, in places. Ton of graffiti, all this like debris, just all the way all the decals and the surfaces work together is possibly my favourite thing about Cities 2. I just adore it. So yeah, we've got loads of small little units kind of come together, absolutely packed it in with all of the container and the van and the trash and bin and things like that, props. Pretty much exactly how I saw it on Google Earth at the start of the episode. And then we've got our big warehouses up here. A little bit cleaner in this space, so slightly less overdone stained decals, you could say. And I've realised I've kind of blocked off the access down the side here with all of these containers, so I might trim them back a little bit. And then just a few extra random bits out the back where they're gathering at the back of the warehouse this side. But all in all, I think it sits on the hill pretty nicely as well, with these little kind of overgrown borders in between, using Sully's riverbed decals, or riverbed surfaces I should say in this case, just to kind of help that feel a little bit more natural. But kind of super pleased with that. Obviously we need to deal now with this horrendous ugly eyesore that has been sat here for the entire episode. So I'm going to start by shaping this terrain and using slope tool here just to get ourselves in a nice sensible hopefully anyway, retaining wall here on this side. I don't mind having the retaining walls. I think we're going to keep them. I mentioned possibly actually tunneling underneath it, making it into a bit of a bridge, but I think the retaining wall kind of works reasonably nicely here, and I've just realised, oh no, we still have a bit of it. We've got some horrendous terrain jankiness tearing there, but we can get rid of that. So let's go ahead now and we'll make this a little bit stronger, and we'll level out a bit more of this section down the bottom here, just so we've got a bit more space to play with. And then we want to smooth off some of these cliffs like this. This doesn't need to be like this anymore. We can go for a bit of a larger brush here just to get rid of that. I kind of want to create a bit of a boundary for this, and the reason being that I'm actually going to put a stone quarry down here. Now, it's not really going to be a quarry, but it is going to function in that manner, but the look of it is definitely not going to be that, so we're not going to start building out like quarry mines and a quarry pit and that sort of thing. But we're going to use the actual stone quarry building to create quite a nice centerpiece, I think, here. So let's actually create a road for it to start off with. So I'm going to go back in and use the alley road, and I am going to just cut this across here because I think that's where we can add in our main building quite nicely. Hopefully it should fit pretty well. So if we add that in here against this road like that, and we've got a lot of better bulldozer to do to get rid of some of those surfaces. And then we're going to go in and add in quite a large mining area. Now we're going to cover a lot of this up with surfaces, so we're not really going to worry too much about what it looks like. Okay, it's going to be quite a small mining area, I should have said. Something along those lines, like this bit obviously needs sorting out. We can't have it kind of flowing uphill quite as steeply as that, so let's just dig in a little bit here. Now I think we're going to end up with a bit of a cliff face here, but that's okay. We'll leave that for another builder to deal with, I think. And I'm realising actually we're getting rid of the retaining wall here now that I did just smooth out, but I think that's okay. I think we're okay with that. I might sort it out a little bit more when we come to do a bit of detailing. But again, we can have a natural bank around this. I think it's similar to what we've had here. But with all of this, we now want to trim it up to make it look like one kind of big industrial yard. That's my idea for this, at least, anyway. So let's get better bulldozer out. We'll go into some elements and we're going to start trimming off a lot of this stuff. So I definitely don't want the random rocks here. That seems a bit weird to me. We can leave some of the poles and some of the extra props in around the building. I'm okay with that. We definitely want to get rid of this fence here, because then we're going to come in with a surface and we're going to go for a concrete surface. I think possibly asphalt, the same as we did up in the big warehouse area. We're going to start it off down here and we're going to run all the way along this road. So I want to kind of cover up this road. I want to make sure we're covering up right to the edge of the sort of harbour wall, as it were, here. And then we're going to go round the edge of our stone quarry area. And this will cover up that texture. So it's definitely not going to look like it's an actual quarry. That's not what we want here. We want this to look like an industrial docklands area, which happens to have some of this machinery in it, because I think it works pretty well and pretty nicely for what we want here. I'm not a huge fan of the yellow, so let's maybe change that up a little bit. Something like that feels a bit more appropriate, I think. Now, I was hoping I could get another abandoned building up here, but I don't think there's going to be enough room with the terrain without causing massive kind of cliff edges. Like a little bit of sort of subtle blended cliff, I don't mind like that, but something huge I think would be inappropriate for this area. So then let's just have a little look at the surface. Like, do we want this one or do we want something slightly more concrete base? So if we go and update it with the area bucket tool, we could have a plain concrete. That one doesn't cover the road, so I don't like that as much, nor that one. We could have concrete squares, or we could go for one of these. I kind of think we're going to stick with that. Obviously, we're going to add a bunch of detail to it. And also, I really don't like these street signs in here. I feel like that would not be needed for an area such as this. I'm also going to get rid of a lot of these lampposts. I did this around the marina area as well, and then added in separate ones on the edge of the harbour wall there, which I think just looks a little bit better. So yeah, I think that is, broadly speaking, okay. Now in here as well, I do want to change the surface up just a little bit. So this is going to be a bit more tricky. We're probably going to have to redo this surface several times, I would have thought. But what we're going to do is we're actually going to come into Terrain Tool. And I'm going to decrease the brush size down to 10, because what I want to do is create like piles of sand and that sort of thing, as if they were sort of shipping it out. So not that it's an actual kind of quarry digging up the stone here, but maybe it's storing it or processing it, that sort of thing. So I'm going to create little mounds, maybe not as severe as that. So we want to turn down the strength here, and maybe let's start again. So yeah, turn down the strength, small brush size, and we're going to create small mounds. They can be fairly big in height, but we don't want anything too drastic, like that sort of tearing through. So let's just soften that a little bit. Something like that's okay. And then we can come up here. I could probably turn it down even more just so we can drag it out. Yeah, something like that. Let's just soften that again. Okay, so something like that will do. And then we can use this back end to put in some props or maybe warehouses or something like that. We could have a few more out here actually as well. So let's just do that. Something along those lines. And then what we need to do is kind of tricky now that we've got this surface on actually. So what I am going to do, having done that, is go and delete it so we can actually see what we're doing here. And then we want to come into surfaces and we can fill in the concrete around these, I think, afterwards. And this is fairly finicky, but it's going to work and we'll get there in the end. But we're going to choose some different surfaces to go in and follow this terrain around. So you can see if we use this, it doesn't really find the humps if we use area bucket tool. So we're going to have to draw them manually ourselves. Okay, so fairly fiddly, but we have ourselves in a concrete surface with piles of, well, sand at the moment, but we can change these to various different products. So I'm thinking this sand texture probably isn't right. So let's go in and take a little look. Like, we've got things like gravel, which we can upgrade that to, which I quite like the look of. We've got some darker gravel in here, so we could do that. I'm on the fill, not the, the upgrade bucket. Never mind. So I think we could have some of that over there. And then if we make sure we're on replacement tool rather than fill tool, then we can choose some different textures for over here as well. So I'm quite liking the gravel, I'll be honest. Not that one. This one. I feel like that looks quite good. And we can have different colours of it as well. We could even go for a bit of the natural oil texture, which I think looks fairly sandy. I'm just seeing some of these peaks look awful now, so we can smooth them out. But we could do something along those lines. So let's just let's smooth that one down just a touch. That's a little bit more reasonable. So yeah, we need a bunch of detailing around this now, but I think this works pretty well considering we are not allowed to place the piles anymore according to the game. At first, when CS2 came out and you used dev mode, you could place piles of sand and concrete and things like that, but not anymore, apparently. We can't find them and find it. So this is an alternative way to get those kind of piles in, and I think it will look pretty cool in the end once we've detailed that all out and help them spill into the main concrete area. And then down here I'm thinking another warehouse building. I'm going to make it non-functional though, because this is technically a functional stone quarry area, so we cannot place buildings over it, otherwise they'll complain of no vehicular or pedestrian access or that sort of thing. So I'm thinking a prop building somewhere down here would be quite appropriate. So we could even do similar to what we did up the top and create a really long warehouse with lots of doors on it on the side this time. I think that could look pretty cool, so let's just line these up nicely. We'll create ourselves a nice long little warehouse building there at the bottom of the hill. Okay, so let's go ahead and finish this off with one smaller detailing time lapse this time, and then we'll come back and take a look at the final build. Okay, so I won't lie, I had an absolute ton of fun with this one. I may have gone a little bit overboard on the decals, but I like it. I like it. So just for situational purposes, here is the gorgeous town of Billy that Scunny created with the amazing little train station plaza out the front here. Definitely a feature of the town of Billy. And we come all the way down here to the new industrial, well, the old industrial waterfront. So we have got some dodgy retaining walls here, but I think it's okay. I think it's okay. I think it's somewhat realistic. And I have decided to leave the retaining wall on this side, so it's a very kind of, probably could use a little bit more smoothing out, but a very low wall on that side as we come down to the stone quarry, even though it's not a quarry, clearly. And I think my favourite thing about this was the decals, and actually using, I can see the one at the top is wonky, but we'll ignore that. But actually using these on the panels of the building, I think has created a much more realistic look with this, rather than just doing it kind of at the top, dripping down, which I usually do. Really loving the kind of layering on the different panels as we go down the little tower there. Yeah, super pleased with that. It's the small things that make me happy, as you might be able to tell. Then we got our piles. I'm not kind of 100% happy with these. Like, I think if I had more time available and more surfaces, I might play around with different ones. It's very hard to blend them in without certain decals into the ground, so it kind of looks a little bit static. Kind of want some more sand decals and that sort of thing. So potentially could be improved upon on my next outing into the city, but it kind of works as the concept, I think, for now. Having these stone piles and making this a functional stone quarry. And actually, if we take a little look at production, you can see here, we'll ignore the budget for now, but you can see we're actually making a surplus on stone, so that's good news at least, even with our tiny little mine here. But yeah, it's definitely more of a stone production storage type area, where they're coming obviously from a quarry somewhere about here, dumping the stone, and then it's being produced into something or other in the little waterfront factory here. So yeah, I think it works. And then we come on round to this area, which was the repurposed marina. I want to say repurposed because I think it was probably an old boatyard or an old marina, and now a different industrial company has come over and taken it over, as you can see from all the different truck beds that we have here. And I was using this farming equipment, I think it's a sprayer or fertilizer of some description. I was kind of using it as it was sort of boat shaped, so I felt like it went with the theme of the area. Maybe a little bit random, but yeah, I think it kind of just about works if we use our imagination. But yeah, our repurposed boatyard, and then we've got obviously our functional little industrial units here where small companies can come out and use these, obviously packed in with all of their different wares and crates and rubbish. And then of course we've got the abandoned warehouse over here. I'm thinking there's some illegal raves in here for sure on certain occasions. But yeah, pretty pleased with how that has come out overall. Just so many decals to try and get the surface to look relatively natural. I think that's probably the trickiest part. If you can get that right, then I think everything else kind of comes together. But I'm pretty pleased with how it looks now. It's a little bit patchy in places when you look up close, but the larger picture I definitely think is there. And then of course we've got our larger warehouse up here, logistics warehouse if you were, maybe Amazon, probably not Amazon. It could be the IKEA warehouse, given that we're in the town of Billy, following on from Sunny's lore that we had there. But there we go, we've got big warehouse, and I think it kind of sits into the landscape reasonably well in its different layers. I was considering whether to put some forestry, like a strip of a small forestry in between the layers on the hillside, but actually I think the sort of overgrown, slightly more sparse trees works a little bit better in this case. So yeah, there we have it. That's my first input into the Detailers Collective series, Holmstock. Please make sure that you subscribe to all of the amazing creators' channels, which are linked in the description below. Keep an eye on my community tab as well to find out who is going next. Let us know in the comments what else you'd like to see in this city. Like, what should lead on from this waterfront? Have you got ideas for what you want to see around Billy? Let us know. Very keen to hear your input on this. But overall, I hope you've enjoyed it. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit subscribe. And if you've enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like and drop me a comment below. But that's all from me for now. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll catch you again next time. Bye bye.